Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be seed starting tomatoes and peppers for our garden. Please like and subscribe to this video so that you can come back to it later and share it with your friends so that they can learn too. For today's video, we're going to be planting a variety of different tomato and pepper plants. Specifically, we're going to be planting bush beefsteak tomatoes, subarctic plenty tomatoes, sweetie tomatoes, red cherry tomatoes, sunrise bumblebee tomatoes, tiny Tim tomatoes, one of my favorites, big beef hybrid tomatoes, and giant tomatoes. And for our peppers, we're going to be planting early California wonder peppers, Gusto Italia peppers, Marconi reds, mini bell mix peppers, and red bell peppers. We're going to be using two different types of seed cell trays today. I have these 12 packs, which we're going to be using for our tomato plants. And I have these 4 packs, which I'm going to be using for our pepper plants. The soil that we're going to be using today is a nice, light, fluffy seed starting mix. You can see here that if I press it together in my hands, it holds together in a ball, but does crumble apart. I've pre-moistened this soil, which means I've dampened it down with water because you want a nice, damp soil for seed starting. Now, how I fill these trays is I just take the tray and I pour the soil inside. You want a nice dense base for your seed starting to make sure that your seeds have a good base for germinating and growing. So I filled it with soil, but then what you want to do is you want to do something I call thumb packing, which means you just press it down lightly so that it just helps to create that dense base that I was talking about, to make sure that there's enough soil in the little seed trays for your plants to germinate and grow nice and strong. Then once you thumb packed, you just cover the tops with more soil and you're ready to go. I'm going to do the same thing with the 4 cells here. These cells are a bit bigger. This just means that the plants will be able to grow a little bit bigger before needing to up-pot them into a bigger pot. I might not even need to up-pot them at all. I'm going to thumb pack the soil down and fill it to the top. And that's it. Let's get to planting. So we're going to be using these 12 packs to plant our tomato seeds. These are a smaller cell, which means I might need to up-pot them before getting them out into my garden, but this allows me to plant more seeds at once. I'm going to be planting 2 different varieties in each tray so that each variety will have 6 plants. Tomatoes and peppers can't take a frost, so it's important that you don't plant these too early on in the season because you don't want them to go out into your garden until after your last frost date. The best time to plant your seeds for tomatoes and peppers is about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. In order to find out what your last frost date is, just type your location into Google and it'll tell you. We're going to start with our giant tomatoes. Now, when it comes to planting seeds in these seed cells, I'm going to plant 2 seeds per cell to ensure that we get good germination, and then when they start to grow, I'm going to thin them down to 1. If you get a few extra seeds in there, not to worry, you can always separate them or just thin them down like I'm going to be doing. Once you drop your seeds onto the soil, you can just take a pencil and poke it down into the soil lightly. You want to plant your seeds about a 1/4 inch down into your soil. Going to add a little bit of soil to this one. And then definitely don't forget to label your seeds so that you don't forget what you've planted where. There we go, our first seeds are planted. Let's move on to our next one. The next one we're going to be planting is the big beef hybrid tomato. I love growing different varieties of tomatoes in my garden. Now last year I grew 23 different varieties. I think that's a little too many varieties for my garden, so I'm gonna try and cut it back just a little bit this year. Tomato seeds are nice and small. And again, we're just gonna plant 2 per cell. I just love getting my hands into the soil. We're going to take our pencil and just press them down into the soil a little bit. And label our seeds, and it's just that simple. Let's move on to the next one, which is our Tiny Tim. Our Tiny Tim tomato is a gorgeous, smaller variety of tomato. They only grow to about 2 or 3 feet tall. Perfect if you don't have a lot of space. Perfect for growing in grow bags. They'll even thrive in a 5 to 10 gallon grow bag. These seeds, again, are a little bit darker, but just as small. And again, we're gonna just plant a couple seeds per cell. We wanna ensure that we have a good germination rate, that we're not wasting cell space, and we can always thin down our seeds at a later date once they start growing. You don't want your tomatoes to be competing for the nutrients in the soil. They are big plants. Next up is the Sunrise Bumblebee tomato. This is a gorgeous striped tomato, orange and red. I didn't grow this variety last year, and I'm looking forward to giving it a try this year. And again, you just want to press them lightly down into the soil. You don't want to press them down too far because they might not germinate at all. Next up is our red cherry tomato. Again, all tomato seeds look pretty similar, and they look pretty similar when they start to germinate as well. So labeling your seeds is a definite must. Next up is our sweetie tomato. This is a gorgeous cherry tomato as well. Next up is our subarctic plenty tomato. Last but not least, our bush beefsteak tomato. Now these seeds are small, so again, not to worry if you drop more than 1 or 2 seeds in each cell. We can just go in and thin out our tomatoes once they start growing. And that's it. Let's move on to our peppers. Now peppers like to be planted a little bit more closely together, so you can plant 2 seeds per cell in these bigger cells, and you can keep both seeds in there. So what I'm going to do is plant 3 seeds per cell to ensure I have good germination. We're going to start with our red bell pepper. Now pepper seeds are slightly bigger, but still quite small. So not to worry again if you plant too many seeds per cell, we can always go in and thin them out later. But you want to ensure you have good germination rates, so that's why I like to plant an extra seed in each cell. Again, we're just going to press them down about 1/4 inch into the soil. Don't forget to label your seeds. Let's move on to our mini bell pepper mix. This is another variety that I didn't grow last year, and I'm super excited to give it a try this year. Peppers love the heat, so you definitely want to make sure that you don't plant these out into your garden before your last frost date. You want to wait until after your last frost date because they can't take a frost at all. Let's move on to our Gusto Italia Marconi red peppers. I'm so excited to be planting these today because it means that spring and summer is on its way. And the last seed we're going to be planting today is our early California Wonder Peppers. This is a gorgeous bell pepper, and they have a high germination rate as well. What I love about peppers is that you can harvest them at different stages of readiness, whether they're red or yellow or orange or green. The taste varies a little bit depending on when you harvest them, but they're so sweet and delicious no matter when you harvest them and at what color. And that's it, our seeds are planted. Now it's time to put them under our grow lights so that they can grow and germinate and be strong and sturdy to go out into your garden. Now we're going to be placing our tomatoes and our peppers under the grow lights. That's going to ensure that our plants grow nice and sturdy and strong and they don't get leggy. They get enough light that they need to be able to germinate and grow strong and be able to go out into our gardens. Now, as you can see here, I have what's called a heat mat sitting here, and our tray is going to sit right on top of this heat mat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, tomatoes and peppers love the heat, and so a heat mat is just going to warm up the soil a little bit. It's going to help with germination. They're going to germinate a little bit faster, and again, they're going to grow nice and strong. The heat mat is going to stay on 24/7, which will allow a nice even temperature for our soil. So we're just going to take our tray, place it right on top of the heat mat. Now, as you can see, the seeds are a little bit too far away from the lights. Ideally, you want the seeds to be 2 to 4 inches away from the lights when they're germinating. So I'm going to have to raise this up a little bit, but they won't germinate for at least 4 or 5 days, so I have some time to be able to move them up. Once they germinate, you definitely want to keep them no more than 2 to 4 inches away from the lights. Now, when it comes to watering these seedlings, you want to make sure that your soil is damp at all times. You don't want them to dry out completely because it can hinder the growth of your plants. Now, there's a couple of ways to tell when to water your plants. The first is by the color of your soil. You can see here in this tray, this is a tray of cabbage that hasn't germinated yet, but the soil is nice and dark and it's a nice rich color. This means that there's plenty of moisture in the soil and this one doesn't need to be watered. The cell is also heavy, and that tells me that there's a good amount of moisture in the soil as well. So this one doesn't need to be watered. When you look at this little cell of kale that I have started here that's just starting to pop out of the soil, this is a lighter color brown, it's a little bit more crumbly, it's starting to move away from the edges, and the cell is much lighter. This tells me that this cell is going to need to be watered. Now, how often you're going to need to water will vary from person to person and from house to house because it depends mostly on how big your plants are as well as the temperature in your house. So there's really no scientific way to tell you how often to water. You're just going to need to use the tips of how heavy your seedlings are, how light the soil is to be able to determine when they need watering. Now, how do you water? I get this question a lot. And the key is to water from the bottom, which means I'm gonna pull out this little tray, I'm gonna pour water into the bottom of this tray, and all of the water is gonna soak up into our seedlings and make sure that it gets the right amount of moisture and water that it needs for the seedlings to grow nice and strong. You don't want to water from the top because especially while your seeds are germinating, they might move the seeds around, it could bury them further, which means they might not germinate at all. And once your seedlings start growing, it can start to spread disease. So watering from the bottom is the way to go. And there you have it. Our tomato and pepper seeds are planted, and I can't wait for them to germinate and 6 to 8 weeks from now be able to put them out into my garden once the last frost date has passed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to this video if you found it helpful, and share it with your friends so that they can learn too. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, friends.